Hello, my name is Richard Capone. I'm the CEO of Let's Go Learn. Many of our customers have asked us to compare the MAP and ADAM assessments. So today I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of the MAP-M, which is the MAP math assessment, and our ADAM assessment. So let me first start and explain that ADAM, our assessment, is not a standards assessment. We do align to the standards, but we were not designed specifically to test standards. We were designed under a diagnostic model, which means we break assessment into 44 sub-skills or sub-tests, and then within each of those we move up and down until we find mastery or non-mastery, or we find an actual instructional point. So these are organized into a scope and sequence of skills. So let me go ahead and take a look at the data, and this will really make it a little clearer. We took two students, Antonio and Aldo, who both took MAP-M and ADAM in the spring of 2017. They were both fourth graders. If we take a look at Antonio first, across the first line, which is blue, we see some scores. We also see ADAM scores. The MAP scores provide a single number. The total score provides a norm reference number as well, where the ADAM scores provide grade level scores. Now, grade level score is a little bit easier to understand. So that's one thing about ADAM, which is different. When you had a grade level score, you can sort of understand, okay, this is a fourth grader, end of year fourth grade, which should be around 4.8, but he has a total score of 5.16, which puts him a little above grade level. Now, MAP will provide a norm reference percentage, 85%, and we see a score of 229. MAP does a really good job at projecting and predicting growth because they have lots of history with items. Every item has been vetted. They know that if a student takes 25 items or 50 items or whatever it may be, that they're very accurately going to come up with this score, and that's what they do. That's the real power of MAP. Now, ADAM, on the other hand, we are not as concerned about the total score. What we're really concerned about is all the individual subtests, and we try to find exactly where students are at, and then we take all those subtests and we sum them up and we create a total score. So in a sense, you see it's sort of it's a little different approach. Now let's go back to looking at these scores again. Let's focus on numbers and operations. And we see that on MAP that this student, Antonio, has a 229 in numbers and operation. All right. Also, Aldo had a 227. So they both are 2 points apart. That means they're pretty close in skill. Unfortunately, the downside of this is when you look at Antonio and Aldo's detailed report, it gives them a generic list of skills that the teacher should target based on the fact that they fall into a range of 221 to 230. So there's 7 pages of skills that are listed for the teacher to target, but they're the exact same for Anthony and Aldo, and I'll show this to you later. Now for ADAM, however, we actually show that Antonio has a 5.7 grade level score and Aldo a 4.71. So actually we're showing there's a pretty big difference within numbers and operations. And if you specifically look over in the table on the right, we see that there are differences. Antonio is higher in a few areas. He's higher in number theory, he's higher in percentages, but Aldo is lower in comparing ordering and lower in fractions. And I think part of the reason why we have a big drop in scores because fractions for us is a really big piece. There's so many skills that we teach in fractions that it actually gives fractions a heavier weight overall in our numbers and operations strand. So as a result, Aldo has a much lower score. Okay, that's because again we're basing our scores based on aggregate skills that need to be taught at in basic foundational math. Okay, so let me go ahead and just explain one more thing before I move on. Both assessments have strand scores as well. So MAP has measurement. Their measurement is actually measurement and data. Then they have geometry and algebraic thinking. ADAM has measurement, data, geometry, and algebraic thinking, and you see those scores there. So both students have these scores. Again, their scores are these single score that don't quite mean as much to individuals, where our scores are grade level scores, which are a little bit more easy to understand. Okay. So now if we break out and look at these two students on the ADAM report, Antonio and Aldo, we see specifically there are some very big differences. If you go to the detailed student report, you'll see that the place value of Antonio, which I pulled out and put into this slide, we see the scope and sequence of how you teach place value. The very bottom, place value 100s, then place value is 100,000. And you go all the way up into the last skill you teach is place value decimals. You see that little minus? That tells us that Antonio was tested in that skill and he got a non-mastery. Right below it, he was tested in place value thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, and he got a mastery. So his instructional point is at place value decimals. We definitively know that because we tested multiple items in each of those areas. Now, the other big thing is a difference between these two students is Aldo has a big gap in fractions. 3.3 is his score on our assessment versus 5.5 in Antonio. So Aldo is a year and a half below where Antonio is actually above grade level. Where you see a limitation of map granularity limits is right here. This is the kind of a report they produce. These are paragraphs, but these are generic. And let me actually show you in the actual report right now. So if I go to, let's take a look at Antonio's Map M assessment. We see this is the cover sheet. We see his individual strand scores, his total score. Now let's break out into numbers and operations. So there's 7 pages of this information. It says Antonio is ready to develop skills. And it lists all these things. Add and subtract fractions to denominator. Add and subtract fractions with like denominator. Add and subtract fractions with unlike denominator. Well, there's quite a bit here, and this is meant to give you a general idea of where to teach Antonio. But of course, Aldo, we know, has the exact same 7 pages on his report as well, because he fell within the same range of 221 to 230. So this is actually inaccurate if you're really trying to drill down to a student level. Okay, let's take a look at Antonio's ADAM detailed report. So first of all, we look here, and this is the way we read it. When you see a minus on top of a plus, this tells you this is the student's instructional point because he got a non-mastery with a mastery. That's a ceiling condition, and we sort things from easiest skills to harder skills on the top. So now let's jump over to fractions since that's what I was showing you. And we see here, this is the scope and sequence of how you teach fractions. You start off the lower skills and you move your way up. His instructional point is right here. Fractions, multiplying patterns of fractions. That's non-mastery right here by subtracting fractions with a plus. Okay, so this is Antonio's instructional point. If we look at Aldo, let's go to that same page on his report. And we actually see that Aldo is much lower comparing fractions. So he's at, we mentioned before, grade 3.3, but he's working on a 3.5 mid-year third grade skill, which is comparing fractions. Now, we have multiple columns here because he did take the assessment multiple times, and we see consistently Aldo has low fraction skills throughout the year. This was the fall, winter, and spring. So that's essentially the differences in a nutshell. If you really take a look at both reports, you could start seeing the granularity that ADAM has, and it really will drive individual student decisions. Map M looks great. It gives you really accurate data right here on the very top for predicting and for planning and for summative, but the data here on these breakout pages are more generic. All right, thank you very much.